Hello and welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in work and in life and simplify them. And friends, we're going to talk about money today because let's face it, that is a huge part of our theme this month, all about discernment, making good choices with the resources that we've been given in this life to make good choices in the future so that we, our family, our entire household thrives. So I'd like to welcome not just one guest, but two guests. This is the Simplifiers first. Two guests at the same time to come and help us simplify it all down. Their names are Miriam Neff and Valerie Neff Hogan. Now, let me start with Miriam first. She is the founder and president of Widow Connection, a not-for-profit ministry. She's also the author of, 11 books, including From One Widow to Another, Conversations on the New You, and Women and Their Emotions. She's a counselor by profession and the co-creator of a video series with her daughter, Valerie, called Wise Women Managing Money. So let's talk about Valerie. She holds a law degree and is a certified financial planner who works with the National Christian Foundation, the Orchard Ministry Development, and Widow Connection as well. She loves to help people overcome financial obstacles to achieve freedom, become more generous, and do more ministry. So I'd like to welcome to the Simplifiers podcast both Miriam and Valerie. Hey, guys.
Hi, Mary.
It's an honor to join you.
I'm so pleased. Now, a mother-daughter duo talking about money. What a wonderful thing it is. How did you guys fall into this as a line of work as your family?
It was a big surprise, actually. I did not know Valerie would become a lawyer, but then I never thought we'd write a book together. I mean, you got a numbers nerd and a word nerd. But I was coming around helping widows that had different issues and coming to Val on getting advice for ones that had great wealth, didn't feel confident to oversee it, ones that needed to change their lifestyle. So I kept coming to her and asking advice. And then we discovered that, we actually have kind of a fun time together.
Yeah.
And someone said, you need to do a video series. People want a little 5-minute blurb on that. And
then that video series became a radio series, became a book. So it just kind of one thing rolled into the next. But we kept hearing the same questions over and over and stories. And so we just really wanted to address it for a lot of women out there.
Yes. And, some of you guys might recognize Miriam's voice because she was on the podcast in season 3, episode 144. You can listen back to that one about how to live boldly after change. Now, Miriam, that was November 2020. My goodness, the world has changed quite a bit from there, right?
What you're doing is so much even more important now. Things have gotten more complicated, and we want to simplify. Otherwise, we can feel overwhelmed.
100%. And so that's what we're focusing on today as our topic, like how to manage your money wisely. And, I want to back up and say, I think the way you guys are approaching this is quite special and quite different from, other people we've interviewed on the podcast when we've talked about money management. You both are coming at it with a biblical foundation. You're both Christian women. Tell me a little bit more about that, how that interweaves into your best practices with money management.
Oh, yeah. Well, I would just say it's a different worldview. We come from this whole topic on a worldview that everything we have belongs to God, and we're stewarding resources that belong to Him.
Yeah.
So that's really important. Also, just a different worldview than typically of what would be in like the financial industry, that it's not just whoever dies with the most toys wins, but that there's a lot more meaning and purpose in what we're going to do with money. So that would be two big ones right out of the gate as to what's different.
Which I think is refreshing. To take a very different look and approach to money, because you're absolutely right. I think a lot are just like more is more, and you need more, and you want to collect all the toys and collect all the things. But let's back up a little bit. What would you consider are the first few steps to helping someone course correct, maybe if they've gone down a not so healthy viewpoint with money, and learning how to better understand their current money situation, like right now?
Okay, first, the principle I think that's most important to grasp is it's a biblical principle, And scripture says, till your field and then build your house. In other words, earn first and then spend.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's a biblical principle, but it works in life. It just works. But our culture says, spend, get as big a mortgage as you can, hope that your income will grow to cover it, put it on a credit card, maybe someday you'll pay it off. So it's very countercultural.
Yeah.
But the thing about it is, if you earn first and then spend less than is coming in, you have peace of mind, you have contentment. Financial stress is a pretty serious thing these days.
Yeah, and I just think that that fundamental of earn then spend, but also just what's coming in has to be more eventually than what's going out.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how you slice it, it's got to end up that way. It only works that way. So those two things are really fundamental, and we can get to the nuts and bolts of the how, but that's kind of an overarching where we'd go with that, to say it's got to boil down to those things.
Yeah, and that's what I really picked up in the first part of the book. The book, side note, everything we talk about on today's podcast episode is in the show notes. So if you go over to simplifierspodcast.com, you can find it there. But the book is called Wise Women Managing Money, Expert Advice on Debt, Wealth, Budgeting, and More. And, the first part really talks about like starting with your why. And you specifically say like, know it, own it, like it, change it. Can you break that down for us?
Well, the first two, you want to go over those?
Well, you know it. And it's amazing how many women don't know how much debt they have, don't know really how much they're spending a month. Now, this isn't true just for women, but it happens, Val and I are women, but it happens with couples, it happens with men. So if you're going to say, well, I want to manage it, well, how can you manage what you don't know?
Yeah.
So you just keep records. And I'm a paper pencil person. Val and her husband are a spreadsheet out to I don't know how many. It's pretty complicated. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter how you do it. It's that you put it all. You think you don't have a budget. You do. You just don't know what it is.
Yeah. So when you know it,
it's going to look back at you and say, here's what's happening here.
Yeah.
And if it's more red ink at the end of the month or the end of 6 months or whatever, then okay, do I like this? Do I like being stressed about money? Mm. Do I like wondering if I'm going to have my home foreclosed on? Mm-hmm. Do I want to stress about what inflation or some other thing will bring to my life? Okay, I don't like this, so what am I going to do about it?
Right.
You're going to change it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, so know it, own it, like it, or change it are, first of all, take stock of what's going on. You have to know what you own and what you owe. So you can chart that out. And there may be some tears over that in the beginning. And sometimes earlier in life, we owe more than we own. But eventually we want to see that flip upside down and eventually own more than we owe. So that's one thing.
Right.
Then another is just own it. We can change it. There may be some things that have happened, but we really want to own the process of making it better. Okay, those things happened. Maybe some of it's self-inflicted. Maybe some of it happened to me, but I'm going to own the process of making it better. And then just if we don't like what we see there, and a lot of things like when you look at your debit account or a credit card account, you can tell it to make a pie chart of everything you've spent, and it will show you the categories. And if you don't like that, it doesn't match your values, then you want to change it.
And I really love that piece in particular, because I think sometimes, and I'll be the first to raise my hand and admit, you think of your bank account as like this slot machine that's just, never ending. You just, you swipe the card, you don't even think about it. But genuinely bringing it back to what my core values are, what I value most in life. Yes. And as I get older, I value experiences a lot more than a house full of perfect knickknackies, stuff, right? And that really gives that aha moment for me of like, oh, my bank statement, my credit card statement is not aligned with my core values. So what do I need to do to change that?
Right.
Well, and we have a values chart where you rate yourself in the book. Mm-hmm. And it's really cool when you can rate 1 to 10 what matters. Yeah. I happen to like adventure, travel, education. I like my grandkids. So I have some things that matter to me, and some other things in the chart, it's like, nah, not so much.
Yeah.
So then I can begin to say, okay, I want to change this to reflect what matters to me. And also, as faith-based women, we want to be generous with faith-based places that are doing good things. You can't do that if you're living beyond what's coming in every month.
Yes. And I want to put a pin in that because I do want to talk about generosity a little bit later in the episode. But yes, I 100% agree. And so, quite simply on the house side, you talk about creating what's called a T chart. So talk us through that, Valerie.
Sure. And I talk with my hands a lot, so I'm just going to try to not catch any cords or anything here. But if you just make a T on a piece of paper and on one side is what you own and on the other side is what you owe.
Yeah.
And there I did it again, talking with my hands, making the T. But you want to chart those again. So, for example, your house may be something that you own, but also you owe a mortgage on it. So house might go on both sides. Mm-hmm. Well, what's the value of the house? And then how much do you own? And you want to tally those up. And in the end, what kind of the industry would call that is net worth.
Yes.
But I just call it net because I believe that our worth comes from somewhere else. Yeah. So as an industry professional, I just say that's your net. But it is important to know and to keep a running tab. So really, that's just the T chart with that. But we then want to, in order to change that, we're going to have to get after and track some other things too.
Yeah. So let's get into the nitty gritty because I think this is what people are really wanting to know, especially now we're year 2022, 2 years post-pandemic, hopefully, getting out of that and trying to make wise choices. Do you have any best practices or tips that is very current to now with managing your money wisely when it comes to housing or managing debt? Let's start there first.
Yeah. I would start very much at the beginning with organizing. So on our way to getting to what we're going to do with housing and all these things, we want to get everything in one place. Are your bills all in one place? Even on your computer are your financial documents? Because sometimes it's just finding everything.
Yeah.
Housing is a huge category. So once we've found and organized all of our things and we're tracking, we might find, and if you haven't bought a house yet, some things to consider are property taxes, insurance. There's a lot of things that come with that. So when we're looking at, can we afford a place? And sometimes we have to look at whether we can afford that place even after we own it. But how about everything? Is there a homeowners association fee? Is it HOA?
Yes.
So really, and then repair. So what the bank tells you can afford in a mortgage, it's probably a whole lot less than that when you add all these things in.
100%. And right now, the housing market is a hot mess.
Yes, it is.
I can point you to an episode if you are needing some guidance in that. I interviewed realtor Robin McCoy recently on how to buy a house in a post-pandemic world. And so that's certainly, you can find that in the show notes and hopefully give you some nitty-gritty there. But, it's silly to me. Like houses right now are going for $50,000, $100,000, $150,000 over asking price. How in the world can you budget that and also be able to feed your children?
Well, one of the things, we have a chapter on housing, we have a chapter on cars, insurance, we have a whole chapter digging deeply into each one of these things. But we know that we can have a part of the housing that's in the discretionary side and some the non-discretionary side. And it may be when you put all those numbers together, it's really better to rent.
Yeah.
Or it's really better to not own a car. And it's not a simple decision, don't do it because of this or that. You get all the numbers together, and when we say know it, it's a simple little 2-word thing, but it takes time. Sometimes we take more time to shop for a phone than we do to get our budget in order, our spending plan in order. So it's a priority, but it matters so much, and there's so much peace of mind when you really get a handle on it.
Yeah. And with that housing, like you were saying, if people are bidding, we do not want to be caught up in an auction. So sometimes if you don't have to buy something, you want to take that emotion out of it. Those emotions can get a hold of us and we can spend tens of thousands of dollars being, what they call married to a deal. It's, I got to have that house. But there is a break-even calculation usually in different markets as to whether it's better to rent or buy. And it usually lands with a number of years, like 5 years, can you break even, rent versus buy? And so, I mean, if a market is, unless you must buy a home, it's something you at least want to run the numbers on and see, can I do that right now? Or if you needed one bigger, maybe it's a time to buy something smaller.
Yeah. Well, that's speaking to the gospel choir over here, like simplifying down. Downsizing is always better, in my opinion, too. And I think that comes from my side, at least, having lived in England for 6 years and now moved back to the States. The houses are mega huge here, especially in Texas. And I go, God, I don't need all that space. Like I managed to, family live in a very modest place and love it and have more than enough. So, I think downsizing is always a better idea to utilize your money wiser, right?
Oh, for sure. And then there's this big contentment thing, and this thing of we think that the bigger, better will be more contented with it. Well, another pair of spiky, sparkly shoes is going to wear out pretty quickly, and it's not going to be that glitzy, and it's not going to be all that fun and rewarding. But to know that you're living within your means and you are putting aside money, one of the things we've learned through the pandemic is you need that 3 to 6 month reserve. And if you say, well, wow, if I had had that before, I wouldn't be in such a crisis mode.
Yes.
But this is something we recommend. And if you don't have that reserve, start with at least $5 a month, just a little, start with something.
Right. Yeah, get started. We say, like, how do you eat an elephant? Just start biting. We're going to need to get those reserves. On the emotional thing, we have a whole part in the book about budget busters, where some of these emotions, you've heard of retail therapy. The problem is it's not that therapeutic 30 days after. And what most people don't remember is if you can't afford it now, can you afford it in 30 days? Yeah. That's what happens when we kind of send it forward by putting it on credit. So with any of these things, that's what that reserve is for. So we don't want to overhouse. We don't want to overdo. I mean, I think simplifying is beautiful because it's going to allow us to get that reserve going, which is going to bring a lot of peace.
Yeah.
Whether I retail therapy with yet another pair of shoes or have some peace in my life when disaster hits, I'm going to go with option B.
And why do you think then that humans, or not just women, but really humans are so obsessed with collecting and buying unnecessary stuff?
I think the culture is a big part of that, because I know when I pull up my bank account now, it says we have debit card for children. And also we have it so easy to click on carts online, put things in our cart, buy it now, and you don't pay now. So it's like, okay, fill up the cart. So some really practical things. First of all, don't use a debit card, because when that goes out of your bank account, unless you're watching it weekly and make sure you have a reserve, the overdraft charges, if it's a $35 charge at least, and every day they can add that if you don't look at the card to realize, oops, I shouldn't have done the debit card. But then you might also use a fast, in other words, don't do it, from credit cards for a while. Just don't use it. Cash is really corny and unpopular.
But it works and it makes us save. So I think that frugality and the contentment, I think if we go back to what you're asking, why humans just acquire, we are barraged daily, just hourly almost, with messages of got to be better, faster, stronger, sparklier, skinnier, richer. You need this, you need that. And so, as a person of faith, I think there's a God-sized hole that only He can fill, and that stuff won't do it. And so contentment is huge. Trying to fill needs or, wants, loneliness, sadness, anger with stuff is just going to have us in trouble at the end of the month, but isn't really going to help the situation that got to where we were emotionally there.
And see, that reminds me of an episode we did this season. Author Sean Conway Wood, I believe it was episode 223, How to Buy Better and Consume Less. And she's tackling these same exact things that you're talking about from a slightly different angle, but, from an ecological angle. Because, a lot of that fashion that you're buying, because it looks super inexpensive and you're like, what a deal. It's, $10, $20 on whatever. A lot of times it's not ethically made well, and it's fast fashion. It ends up in a landfill after a couple of wears, right?
Yes, so much ending in a landfill.
Right. And so then it becomes even bigger of like, what am I doing as an effect to the planet? We're getting that short-term thrill from a very disposable thing that's hurting the planet too, right?
Right. And I mean, short term is really short term. I think you walk out of the store sometimes and it's, that was fun for 30 seconds and then that goes away. But the bill stays, the landfill fills, and it's not doing what the culture is telling us those things will do for us.
And I would just add, as an idea, is to put stuff in your shopping cart, but then don't buy it. Wait a month. Mm-hmm. What's in the shopping cart? How contented were you without it?
Yeah.
Just wait.
Yeah.
Because it's too easy. And I love the technology of it. Oh, I can tell you there are things that I order and I'm glad to have them come to my door. But it makes it easy to overdo because you're not paying at the time. So just close the shopping cart or go away.
That's a really good point. And you're absolutely right. A couple of things that came to mind when you said that. On my Amazon account, because Amazon's the easiest to buy impulse things. It's just so there. It's like, it'll get here in 6 hours. That's insane that's our modern world. Is I do the exact thing. I have a list, like a wish list. And I will put books or I will put things on the list and not actually buy it. And it just becomes my running list. But then, one thing I took a step forward was like, hang on, all of these books I can check out from my local library. Like I don't actually need to buy the book or whatever. But I love putting a place of delay into it because apps and websites and marketing is built to help you ease the jump from, I want it to, I've bought it. That's what they do. That's what the tech is built for.
Yes, and the tech and marketing, and again, they're for-profit businesses, so they're in it to make profit. But if you understand what the goal is, I mean, they're selling items and selling that instant gratification and selling on credit. They're debt is big business. So we want to understand. The other thing is, how many of us could know exactly if we were asked, that coffee or whatever we buy daily, how much is it exactly with tax? Could you say? I mean, much of the time, I'm not sure that I could because it's just kind of mindless. Well, there are studies out there that show you will spend at least 20% more when it's the mindless swiping. Right. So as uncool and kicking it old school as cash is, when I'm standing somewhere and if I'm in a grocery or a restaurant, I don't want to do dishes and I don't want to have to put things away at the checkout counter. So I become a math genius when I'm standing there with cash. And that's all I have. When the cash is out, we're done. Whereas on the credit card, it's like, I'll have dessert. I'll have a beverage. Why not? Because it's that mindless swiping. So I think even to just get mindful about things.
Yeah. And I can imagine even if you tried that for a day or 7 days and just literally lived a cash only life, it would be eye-opening of like how much goes out the door. So I want to switch gears a little. What would you give us some advice on how we could best choose a financial advisor that can help us keep our best interests at heart?
Yeah. One is vet, which, there are resources like brokercheck.org where you can see if there are complaints. So let's just weed out the very, not ideal, bad to start out with. Check reputation, ask around. We're not looking really for immediate friend or relative. It could be in there, but I like to say interview 3 at least. And then you want to make sure that they're really listening to you. And this is a challenge for us sometimes as women. If we're going in there with our husband, are they speaking to both?
Yeah.
And are they really listening to what your goals are? Or are they or you feel that they've got a product or a program to sell and they're pushing that. So, I mean, that's a main, if they're, really pushing a product and not listening, then I would just say move on. We want one that's really listening to our goals long-term and trying to make those happen. That's the biggest thing I'd look for.
Yeah.
And I would add, when I was in charge of our portfolio after my husband had gone to heaven, one thing I did is when I interviewed 3, I said, if you had this much, and I suggested an amount, what would you suggest for those investments? And they came back with very different proposals. And I looked at how much money was going to, like if it was a mutual fund, how much do you have to pay to be in it? What are the costs every year? Now, I'm becoming a numbers nerd like Valerie. I mean, I'm a word nerd. Let's just settle that. But this was money entrusted to me by God. It's all, that's where, as faith women, it's God has given us intelligence, time, the ability to work, and the ability to earn. So how am I going to oversee that well? And I also have found that anyone that's giving you advice, if they're doing all the talking, run, don't walk away, because we need to be competent and feel like we are overseeing well, whatever it is, even our home, our wardrobe, our money, those investments. And if someone just wants to sell you on their product, which some do, and one of the things that Valerie taught me was she said, ask what transaction needs to take place for you to get paid. Because if they say, well, we're taking 1% of the portfolio every year, whether it goes up or down or we do anything,
you just need to know that. Well, that's standard in the industry, and it's not necessarily bad. It's just you need to know. Or if you're getting planning and it's going to be a fee hourly, you just need to know that.
Right.
If they get squirrely, I mean, they should be able to tell you how they make money. Again, they're not a business nonprofit, but they really should be straightforward about how they're going to get paid.
It's a very valid point. And I've certainly been in meetings with prospective financial advisors where it was like, oh, okay, so you ready to sign at the dotted line? It's like, no, this does not feel right. And you just need to be empowered because, I mean, let's face it, the reason why we would hire a financial advisor in the first place is because there are blind spots that we're just not aware of, and that you want to have a trusted partner who, shares your core values and understands your goals, right?
Well, I would also say not everyone needs one. And one of the things you can learn, if I can learn and come home from the library with stacks of books to learn about investing, you can get to where you're on a platform where you put your money where you want it to go or buy and sell. And it can be very low fee. And I'm not saying this is for everyone, but it can be for some people. So you can start with someone that's helping you make decisions, and then you may move away and move to where you're doing it on your own.
So let's switch gears again. This is a very unsexy topic, but I think it's really important to say out loud. Let's talk about living wills. Can you give us some best advice on why it's so important to have a will regardless of how old you are?
Yes, we can. We're quite opinionated on this topic.
Yes.
So in general, 60% of people will die without a will, and there's a will and then a trust. So at a minimum, write down wishes and at least notarize, maybe get 2 witnesses. And I would recommend a will still go to probate, but at least it's instructions for what the judge should follow. A trust would generally not go through probate, but it is a little bit more expensive. But the thing is, we've seen extended family that has passed away with a will or a trust, particularly a trust that goes quickly and easy. If there's nothing in place, it can be a bit of a disaster. So if folks are curious, Google some of the rock stars that have died without a will and look at how many months and how much money was spent. Years and how much of their net worth. Now, we're not all rock stars, but we all have something. So that as a stewardship move, it's just not a good move. And it makes it super stressful for the people who are left behind. So it's a very loving thing to do to have a will or a trust. And I would encourage, if you own a home, at least maybe look at a trust, because then it doesn't go through probate. And all your assets a lot of your assets can be put in, but at the end, it's just the trustee reading it, executing on it. and then the assets move out quick. Quick relative to what it could be. So it's just a loving thing and a good idea. So
yeah, and for me, because I feel like I'm knee deep in all of this right now, so that's why I'm super passionate and like asking for a friend, you guys, is one. I mean, if you have children, you should have a will end up, right? Because
Absolutely.
you can't assume that somebody else is going to have your children's best interest at heart when you've died. That's bottom line. But two, where I'm asking for a friend, get really frustrated about this, is that if you're caring for aging parents who don't have a will in place and they go, well, you can sort it out when that day comes. It just drives me crazy.
It's not loving. It's not loving. If someone says, well, I don't have time, or I've heard a couple say, well, we're not in agreement on what charities we should give to, so we're going to wait. Don't wait. Put in place what you can agree on.
Yes.
It isn't a loving thing to not have it, because then you're leaving people that are perhaps grieving and other things are upsetting without the tools that you could have provided. And if Valerie mentioned that a trust is a little more costly, but you'll pay much less for a trust than you would for an appliance. And the appliance is temporary.
Yes.
And the trust is going to take what you've been entrusted with to send it on to good places, to family members, not enabling them, charities, whatever.
Yes.
I get a little carried away. Sorry.
yeah.
Mom, Dad, do you hear Miriam right now? Listen to this very wise woman. It's very important because I think, I'm sure that my situation is not unique. I'm sure there are quite a few people out there just like me who are caring for aging parents, and their parents are, from a different generation.
Yeah.
Or when we talk about wills, we're talking about dying. And that's really scary to like, oh, well, no, we don't even want to bring that into our reality. It's like, well, like you said, Miriam, is it a loving thing to do to just lump it on your child's shoulders for them to sort out later?
It's really not. And, it's just, and, we have in one of the classes that I've attended and co-taught, we go over and people raise their hands and say all the different reasons why they don't want to make one. And some are like, oh, I don't want to think about dying. I don't want my kids to argue, which, by the way, you can't prevent that, especially when you're gone. So if you love the way that your state is running things and you want them to decide where all your assets are going to go, I guess you might not want a will or a trust. I don't think that's a good stewardship move because the state gets to decide, including where your kids go. They will generally follow certain principles, but not every judge has made a reasonable ruling, as we've probably all seen examples of.
Yeah. And just a reminder, again, there's great tips and best practices in their book about this specific topic on creating a will, where to go next, how to ask those right questions. So it's all in the book. So I want to circle back to what we said at the beginning about the role of giving and generosity, and like what is the role that it plays in managing your money wisely? Tell me more about your beliefs.
Yeah. So again, as a person of faith, I believe that everything belongs to God. So we're really managing things that are His. So am I managing it well? Am I managing it the way, if I were to open my budget, which, by the way, I do believe He can see anyway, how does He feel about that? He entrusted me with those resources to care for others, to care about the world I'm living in, to care about people that are struggling. Is what's on that paper matching up with what He's entrusted me to do with that? Or am I becoming kind of a bottleneck where all the stuff is getting stuck here? I really believe that one of the things I love to see women do is come from a position of struggling to stability, stable, to surplus, to generous. And when they're confident about it, so they've practiced, getting on their feet, managing money well, and now they're coming from a position of strength to go out into the world and go and do all that God has for us, helping others, looking around. When we see crisis, we can really step into it with strength and say, oh, cool. I have extra. It's bad that thing's happening, but I can be part of the solution right now. So, I mean, I can get really passionate about that because it's not just for us. That's really not that motivating. Oh, yippee, another car. I mean, we'd be happy, until somebody hits it. So, I mean, those things are not lasting, but these things are lasting.
And if I can add, being able to give to others and reach them, and that's part of why I do what I do with Widow Connection and what we do in Africa with young widows and all of that. But also, one of our values is, of my 4 children, some are adopted. Valerie has adopted children. Some of those ways for children to be adopted need funding.
Yeah.
It's so satisfying to be able to take a good cause, something that's in your values. And now I'm saying specific things, and everyone joining us right now has different things. But that's okay. You decide that. And they're able to say, I can make a little difference here. I can make a little difference there. I can volunteer with time to see how is it run? Is it really run well?
Yeah.
And it's life-giving and joyful.
Yeah.
I don't meet that many grumpy, generous people. Most of them are quite happy and joyful.
Yeah, it's so true. And I mean, one way that I personally give, it's drops in a bucket, but it truly, those drops in a first world country like, the States versus, say, Ethiopia or the Philippines is a massive rainstorm of abundance. One way I do is I reinvest money over and over and over again through Kiva, which creates small business loans for, men and women who are producing these businesses all over the world. A business may be a retail storefront to sell grains and seeds in Ethiopia or to build a school in, the Philippines. And that's a beautiful way where you think, I'm going to need thousands and thousands of dollars. No, maybe $100 here and there, $250. And it's a low interest to no interest loan that you're presenting that money forward to these people who otherwise don't have means and access for them to flourish. I mean, that's how you create a positive impact in the world bit by bit, right?
Definitely. Love that. And there are a couple different organizations that do that, microloan and microfinance. So that's a great multiplier of surplus.
Yeah.
And it can go a long way in some places.
So again, the book is called Wise Women Managing Money, Expert Advice on Debt, Wealth, Budgeting, and More. And you can find that in bookstores all over, including the one right down the street in your local area. And also, you can find their information and loads of resources over at their website, wisewomenmanagingmoney.com. And you've also got some budget forums on there that are all available for free, just as a place to begin, right?
Definitely.
Yes. Please go there, and you can watch our 5-minute video series. If you don't want to read a book, just watch us. It's in the family room, and we didn't allow the dog in the room.
Brilliant. So I have a few questions as we wrap up that I like to ask everyone. And thank you so much again for your time today. First question is this. Tell me what's one book or blog that you're reading these days that's either inspiring you or poking holes and challenging your belief system.
Okay, I'm going to be real old-fashioned, but classic here.
Yes. The
book is The Intelligent Investor, and it's by Benjamin Graham. And he is not on the planet anymore. It has been revised, and his principles are so solid. And it doesn't happen to be directly faith-based, but it's a whole bunch of wisdom, and actually the whole ideas behind them happen to coordinate with Scripture. How about that?
Brilliant.
And it is a good academic read. It is not a graphic novel, so
good
just
to know.
A word of warning.
Yeah.
I'm really liking a book called Fervent by Priscilla Schreier. It's about prayer, and it's just a really good, uplifting book written for women on prayer. I'm also just loving, they do have an organization, a podcast, different things, but faith-driven entrepreneur, faith-driven investor. And they talk a lot about what you were talking about, impact investing. Meaning, is the money that now, once we move over into that surplus and we're saving and we're, just crushing it with our investments and being a girl boss with all of our money, are those investments, like, what are they going into? And are they doing encouraging and uplifting things in the world? So
I love
really
it.
like that.
Well, we'll put all the links to those books in the show notes again over at the simplifierspodcast.com. So tell me, who is one person, someone you know personally, you just feel are up to brilliant things? If we were to shine a spotlight on them, and who knows, maybe one day we'll have them on the podcast.
I have to think a moment.
Well,
Because mine is not an individual person, so you go.
While you're thinking, I'm thinking of someone, Lysandra Hutchison. Mm-hmm. She is a young widow, 4 children, and she is doing great things related to grace and grief as she moves forward, and she is one courageous young woman.
Brilliant. Well, I'll let that be the answer for both of you guys then. We will link her in the show notes. I believe gratitude and simplicity go hand in hand. Tell me, what are you grateful for today?
I personally am grateful that at this vintage stage, I can be so limber and so active. I can still run around to other countries and just function. And I call it the 4th quarter of my life. And I am for myself praying that I will continually wear the armor of Ephesians, put that armor on every day for whatever God has for me in this 4th quarter.
I love that. Val?
Yeah, it could go in so many directions. I have a lot of gratitude everywhere. I have gratitude to my family, who, I've lately been running around after the book, writing a book, but then doing interviews and podcasts. And so everybody's picking up, a few extra dog walks, a few extra grocery runs. So Mark, Edmund, Albert, Edward, they're all over the place, but just really appreciating all they're doing to kind of lift me up to be able to help others doing this.
Brilliant. We appreciate you guys as well for allowing these 2 wonderful ladies to come and be on the podcast today. So my final question is this, and again, thank you so much for your time and sharing your beautiful brains. Someone somewhere is listening to you and I right now, and she's thinking, gosh, I do really want to manage my money wisely. It has been a little bit of a hot mess these last couple of years. Let's be real. What's one thing you could whisper into their ear just to encourage them in this moment?
Yeah, you can do it. And just get started. It's again that, how do you eat an elephant? Just start biting. One of my friends said, one of the things about life is it's so daily. And so it will benefit you to just little by little go after it a little bit every day. You can get started by just organizing things, as we mentioned early on. Just gather things and get them in one place. And there you're started.
And I would add, there's an example in Scripture where the children of Israel needed to leave Egypt, and there was a big river in front of them that they needed to cross. And they were told to cross that river, but when they looked at it, it was still a river. And they said, but they had to put their foot in the water first, then it parted. So like Valerie said, just do that one little thing, because one thing it does, it signals the Lord that we're willing to change, that we want to do something, and we're empowered by that.
Thank you, ladies, so much for your time today.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us on.